Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Live at 5. I'm your host, the curator, Kevin Adkisson, and today the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research is excited to bring you a tour of a place I'm here at the compound of the Cranbrook Institute of Science, which is right at the center of the campus. And today we are going to be examining the house that was built for the Institute's former Distinguished Scholars Program. And that all electric homes in Michigan, and it was really built to be a showstopper and to also be a product demonstration for hundreds of companies who donated their services and their materials to build the Edison House. Right now, the Edison House is not used for anything. It has some storage inside, but I am excited to announce that it is going to be brought back online for this academic year as classroom space. And so we're doing a little bit of work right now, researching the house and working with the Cranbrook facilities team to help bring it back into a usable state. The last person to live in it was the former CIS director who left in 1996. It then was used for events, offices, capital projects. It's used for sort of flexible space off and on, but it's been a minute since anyone was using the house. And you're going to see when we briefly step inside that it is not really habitable. So excuse the mess. With that out of the way, just so you know where we are, here is Institute Way, which leads us on to the Art Museum in that direction. The in the field of botany, of genetics, of the natural sciences, Michigan history, but also sort of anthropology, all the things that the Institute of Science was interested in. He wanted to be able to have year-long distinguished scholars to come to campus, but he needed a place for them to live. And Edison House is it's an interesting project in the history of Cranbrook because I think it's sort of the last thing that gets built by the institutions as truly separate institutions. It's interesting looking in the archives at just how little sort of community input there was in the building of the house. It was really Dr. Hatt, his chairman of the board, Mr. Beresford, who was Booth's son-in-law. And they really set out to build this house, and then they found community support, especially from the former head of the Edison Electric Company, Detroit Edison. And so Detroit Edison really spearheaded the creation of the house, including providing the architect, which I think it's interesting that, not 500 feet from one of America's great architectural programs, there was seemingly zero input from the Art Academy on the creation of this little mid-century modern house. The architect was a gentleman named William P. Smith, who I have had very little success in finding any information about. William Smith was registered as a contractor in Pontiac in the late 1920s. So the age would be right that it's the same William Smith who designed this building. He worked at Detroit Edison by the 1950s when he was converting some of the major switching stations in downtown Detroit. They're attributed to William Smith. But it really is, I think, the in-house Edison Electric Company architect who designed this mid-century modern gym. And as I mentioned, those of you who are just joining us, it really is no longer used, so please excuse the condition of the landscape. But it's interesting, the house has this blend of sort of craftsman-style architecture and mid-century modernism. It's a little bit of Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a little bit of sort of Eames and Saarinen. You'll see on the backside, it's an all-glass home. But then it also, I think, continues the tradition of the arts and crafts that started here at Cranbrook with the booths in 1904. Outside, there used to be a koi pond here, but we're also seeing the first of many electrical features. We're seeing on the roof an Anaconda copper roof. That's the same company that built the Kingswood roof, a much smaller project here for the company, but they donated the copper seam roof. What's interesting is if you look at the seams of Edison House and then compare them to what's at Kingswood, Eliel Saarinen designed custom triangular seams. Here at Edison House, you have the more standard rectangular seam. Then there is brick, and Dr. Hatt had great sort of conflict over whether or not to build a fireplace in the house because it was an all-electric show house, and a fireplace certainly isn't electric. But he decided that the house needed to be a home, and the hearth is the center of the home. So he did include a fireplace in the design. Then there are these funny little mushroom copper lamps. And originally there was actually substantial outdoor lighting because, again, this was a show home. And for the first 3 months that it was here, from June, July, August, it was actually opened as an exhibit. And so you could get tickets through the Detroit News, and then you could come and you could tour through the Edison House. And there was a volunteer staff that served as your guide, and you saw all of these products, and you got this 25-page booklet that listed every single company that had donated a product to the Edison House. And as we moved through the house, I came in the sort of pedestrian route, but the vehicular access, how the distinguished scholars and then later directors of the Institute would have come in, were off this electrically heated driveway. So there are coils underneath. I don't think it still works. Most of the electrical does not work, but it was an electrically heated driveway. And then you came into a radio-controlled electric garage door. And now you see how the house is really nestled into the landscape. And then all of the trees were very carefully planted as specimen trees. And so the Institute could use these as part of its woodland education program. And I'm very excited that the landscape is going to be sort of cleared out of the underbrush, and these trees will be highlighted again. I just noticed walking in this afternoon the Total Electric Award, which is this is a gold medallion home, Live Better. I'm not sure exactly what this is, but if any house deserved it, it was the Edison Electric House here at Cranbrook. Now, it opened in 1966. In researching the home, though, I actually found an even earlier all-electric house. In 1958, the Westinghouse Electric Company opened the Westinghouse Total Electric Home in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that was designed by a Japanese-American architect, George Matsumoto, who was actually a graduate of Cranbrook. And so there is an all-electric home down in the Carolinas, and it was a kit home. And there is, like all good esoteric topics, there's a blog that completely covers every Westinghouse Total Electric house. And so there are probably 24 Matsumoto electric houses. Now, as I come to the back of the home, we see how it is actually a 2-story house, and it's built on this ravine. And so you can see we're standing on redwood, a redwood porch, and the house is all constructed out of stained redwood and laminated redwood beams. The redwood is from Washington State, and it was chosen because it's very durable wood, and so it wouldn't rot, and they wouldn't have to treat the material. The brick is all die-cut brick, and so the way that this would work, or extruded brick, and so it's extruded out of a machine, and it was thought that this was a way of achieving sort of the handmade brick quality that Saarinen used at a much lower price point. I think you can tell the difference between a Saarinen brick and an Edison electric brick, but it does look very nice. We'll head inside now, just for a quick look around. And if you're just joining me, I'll just say again that we are in the process of bringing Edison House back online. The house had been used as a home from 1966 to 96, and then it was used for offices and event space, and we're bringing it back as classroom space, and then as Institute of Science. We'll take it over once the threat of the virus and the need to socially distance our students is over. So stick with me. We're going to look at some highlights of the home. I feel a little bit like I'm airing the dirty laundry, but I did get permission to do this just for you all on Instagram. So we're excited to show you the sort of original condition of the house, and then in 2 months we'll come back and we'll do a tour and we'll see how the restoration project came. I should not call it a restoration project. The house is wired with all sorts of electric systems, including a new-tone microphone and speaker system. I love the sort of mid-century modern doorbell, but the new-tone system was wired to speakers throughout the house, and it even had speakers outside of the home that would bring bird songs from the woods behind the house, and then you could pipe the sound of the woods and the bird songs into the house. We come into this sort of 2-story space. It has this beautiful floor, which is from Delaware, Ohio, the Delaware Ceramic Company, these hexagonal tiles. And then it has the concrete baffles here, which, if you know Cranbrook and you know Saarinen's designs well, you know that this is a sort of typical Saarinen detail in the stairways. By 1966, it's a fairly common mid-century modern detail, but I think it is interesting the sort of parallel that this stairway has with the one at Saarinen House and many of the stairways at Kingswood. Now, what this stairway has that Saarinen's never do are these cool bullet lights, and they actually have a sort of rose-colored lens on them, and they were meant to be a night light. The pamphlet that advertises the home is extraordinarily gendered, and talks about the sort of safety of the wife of the distinguished scholar and how she can illuminate her way to the kitchen and feel sort of guided by the glow of her redwood baffle bullet lights. It is interesting the way that they thought about just how gender normative the whole house was, but also the different lighting schemes for sort of bird watching versus seeing if there is someone at the door versus going to the kitchen in your slippers. And then we come into the main living room for the distinguished scholar. Originally, this bookcase here was actually a bench, so there was a built-in seat with a Marion Strangel upholstery on it. And then the lights have also changed. The house got a renovation in 1984, and so many of the original fittings were removed. But you can still see the sort of great bones of the house, this sort of brick enclosure, and then the wall of all glass with the redwood beams and the, I don't think that's redwood, pine perhaps, ceiling. And then the lighting for this room, beyond the hanging fixtures, there was also indirect light behind all of the valances. And then from there were also fiberglass curtains that hung down that were a Knoll and Corning glass collaboration. And then behind the curtains, the original windows, which these are the original windows, you can see they have a very thin transparent bronze coating. And so it's almost like electroplated glass, except you can't see the coating. And so this is an electric current that would run through and it would heat the window. And so the windows were meant to provide heating for the room in addition to the baseboard heating. Now, there is a fireplace, as I mentioned. It's covered up by these waiters. It is the Institute of Science. But we'll see downstairs a better view of the original fireplace. The house was meant to be a show home not only for the different companies, but also for different wood species. And so there are 6 different woods used as plywoods. And it was the American plywood company. I don't remember the name, but it was a plywood company. It was a legacy company, and they were trying. Edison House, they donated pecan, persimmon, birch, cherry, and walnut plywoods to use. And the Institute director, Robert Hatt, thought that it would be, he chose those woods so that you could see the plywood inside and then see the tree outside as this sort of teaching knobs that control all the different ways that you can light the home. And then here is the new tone speaker system that again could play bird noises from out on the patio or and then this amazing kitchen. I'll stand on this side and hope that we stay connected. So the kitchen is really where the ease of modern electric cooking comes into play. You have this great all-electric fluorescent light and plastic ceiling grid. And then you have the original Frigidaire equipment. And Frigidaire at this time was a division of General Motors. And some of you may know that many of the designers for Frigidaire, including of this amazing flare range, many of these designers were Cranbrook graduates. They were called the Damsels of Design, and they worked under Harley Earl in the design division. And in particular, the woman who designed the flare range, she was named Jane Van Alsten. She generously donated her archives to Cranbrook, and so we have her papers over at Cranbrook Archives. They're amazing to see all of her drawings of both kitchens, but cars, sort of anything that you could envision for a better future through General Motors. Van Alsten was from Delaware, Ohio, also where the floor tiles were from. And she studied at Cranbrook from 1941 to 42, so she was in that sort of golden age. She would have just overlapped with Knoll and Eames and Rapson and Harry Weiss, Bertoya, Eero Saarinen was still here, Eliel was still the president. She went on to study at Pratt. She studied again in New York, and then she went to General Motors in 1955. She stayed there until 1969. She was the studio head for the Frigidaire kitchen division. She was responsible actually for the kitchen of tomorrow that Nixon went and visited. She was also responsible for the kitchen of tomorrow at the 1964 World's Fair. And this is one of her iconic design. So we still have the original dishwasher here, and then we still have the honey beige flare range. And I'll just do a little demonstration. Here's the vent hood that pops up, and then the ovens, which have a glass here. This is the Tendermatic roaster, and there's the great Flare logo. all these amazing mid-century modern knobs, the great mid-century modern clock with the cool clock hands, and then where is your range but in this drawer? And sadly, these no longer meet building codes to have a range that can tuck in like that because it can easily start a fire. I also love the plug-in that is right next to the range, but it didn't burn this house down. And hopefully the construction has to get behind the range in order to deal with some issues in the wall, but hopefully it will be put back as a historic object, and it does still function. So there's the range. Then there was also a automatic paper towel dispenser. In the countertops, the ease of living, there's the Newtone Food Center, which is where you could connect your mixer and your food processor. You would have all the different equipment that would stick down in there. The original dishwasher. And then over here, there was originally a flip-down toaster called a hideaway toaster, and you could flip it down and then it connected into the table. Talk about ease of modern living. And then all of the cabinetry is the original, and it has all this great Detroit Sterling Hardware Company pulls. The Newtone speaker, and then another mid-century modern clock. And we're going to keep all of the old systems as part of the rehabilitation. We'll keep all of the systems on the wall, even though most of them don't work. But as part of telling the story of the house, I have requested, fingers crossed, that all the switches remain on the wall. Now, I will just take us in with some very carefully framed camera views into the study, which has these original lighting, which are very much inspired by Alvar Aalto, the great Finnish modernist, donated from another Michigan company. And then you can see how in the study you could look out over the koi pond, and you can again control all of the lights on the inside and outside from the comfort of your study. And then the house had the master suite here, which has these really great mid-century modern cabinets built in. The green carpet dates back to when this was used as an office building. And more of that wonderful cabinetry and original hardware. I'll just point us to one of the bathrooms. Briefly down the stair into what was a bachelor's apartment and conference room for the Institute. So the big driver of it was the chairman of the board, and he thought this would be an appropriate place to have board meetings. It is built into the hill, so you have the views out one side, and then you have brick walls behind this sheet board. But I wanted to bring us down here so that we could see the beautiful hearth, which does match the one above. And it has the granite stone coping and then the brick above. And this was another location where there was a Newtone dictaphone that popped up. Let's see, any other questions about the house? This is where your fireplace would have hung down, the fireplace tools. The stairway for, I assume for fire code, or at least egress, maybe even just noise, there's a plastic sheet, but originally it was open above. And then we'll just look down in one of the smaller bedrooms, just because they have these great built-in cabinets with the pulls and handles. Okay, Rocco, I've been to your kitchen. Yes, this house is better than a New York apartment's kitchen, that is for sure. Welcome to suburban living. If anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I hope that you've enjoyed this tour of the Edison all-electric house. It really was a showpiece. When it opened, it was featured in all the newspaper and got lots of press. My favorite articles, one titled it I think 6 or 7 distinguished scholars before that program was retired and it went to sort of curatorial and then directors' houses. But one thing that's interesting is Dr. Hatt, he thought this house was such a success. He had a huge success in getting donations. Cranbrook paid absolutely nothing for this whole thing. The Edison Electric underwrote most of it, and then all the materials were donated. And he thought, what's more modern than an all-electric house? Perhaps an all-nuclear house. And so next to the Edison all-electric house on this side, he wanted to build a 2-family all-nuclear powered home. And it would have been the Fermi House did not get off the ground. In 1973, it was still slated to happen, but Michigan had a big nuclear conference scheduled for 74, and then there was some nuclear meltdown in Michigan in 73. Maybe not a meltdown, but something went wrong, and the state was turned off of nuclear power, and Dr. Hatt's dream of building America's first all-nuclear powered home did not become a reality. When the house was dedicated on June 1st, 66, Thomas Edison's son, Charles Edison, the former governor of New Jersey, was here to dedicate the home, and it really was a sort of grand fete. And I hope that we're able to bring it back online in a respectful manner. I think the kids are really going to enjoy getting to use the house. I know I will enjoy seeing the house being spruced up, and I'll bring you back over to see it then. Yes. What show was I on? I was featured on Detroit's PBS special on culture today, so you can go and check that out. Thanks for watching this live at 5, though, from Edison House. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to go to the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research website, and there's a support tab, and we certainly appreciate your support now more than ever, as we are not doing any regularly scheduled tours this summer, and that is where all of our financial backing comes from. So if you can, we would love to have you support the center and our mission of sharing the many different Cranbrook stories of art, science, education, and community. Thanks for watching. I'll be back Thursday with another Live at 5. And if you're on Facebook, I'll be on Live at 5 tomorrow, coming from Thornley House, the home of Henry Scripps Booth. See you Thursday.